from the Arts Academy. This is the CAPE network, which is supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers Nord Plus for Higher Education program. The CAPE network is to develop collaborative art and environmental science educational innovations. This is supported with evidence-based scientific knowledge informing the participating art students, teachers, and mutually sharing the creative process with our environmental science students and teachers, the praxis of arts and science. The CAPE network includes 10 countries, 15 university partners spanning a large geographical sweep from Greenland in the north to Lithuania in the south. We include Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania as our partners. These university programs bring their expertise towards arts pedagogy and environmental science. As stated, the Nord Plus Creative Arts and Pedagogy in the Environment, the CAPE network, is supported by the Nordic Council of Ministers and the Baltic countries through the Nord Plus Higher Education Program. Today is our 8th and concluding webinar, CAPE webinar of 2021. We were pivoted to the online presence and the connection with our partners due to the current state of affairs in which we live. But there's been a great wealth and a real diversity of presentations. We have a small cohort today, but this is being recorded, so we know that this is important and will be archived on our website for use later. This is such a important way to end our year of presentations with our guest, who is with us today from Aarhus University. And I'm very pleased, and it's a privilege to present Nsah Mala. His name is Kenneth Nsah, who is a Cameroonian poet, writer, author of children's books, and literary researcher. He writes in English, French, and other languages. We are very, very privileged to have his presence today, and especially in the context of the overall global issue of the climate crisis. If you've been following the news, there are currently biblical floods in the South Sudan. The South Sudan is not the region about which will be presented today, but we do know that in the global South, there is a real disproportional impact of this climate crisis upon places and countries who contribute very little to the carbon footprint globally. And I think that that's a particularly important fact that we absolutely should be aware of in our Nordic area, which also faces critical climate impactful actions. But it is my pleasure to turn things over to Nsah Mala, and just a wonderful way and opportunity to end our year-long series of webinars. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, David, for having invited me to this, and also for your very generous introduction. If I may add anything to your introduction, it would just be to say that my legal name is Kenneth Nsah, and my pen name is Nsah Mala. So, and then also to, I think it's also important because, as you mentioned, it's true, I write principally in English and sometimes in French, but also in Itenga Mbasa, known in short as Mbasa, or the Mbasa language, which is the language of my nation. I mean, my kingdom, the kind of First Nations, as we will call them elsewhere, or indigenous nations prior to colonization, and that is in Cameroon. And I actually come from the English-speaking part of Cameroon, which is at war now as we speak. That's rather unfortunate, but I'm not going to be talking about that one. We are going to be talking, as you've already said, about the climate crisis, and a lot of my focus will be on the Congo Basin, but of course, in passing, I will be sometimes mentioning Africa as a continent. So that being said, I will like to share my screen with you to facilitate my talk. I hope you can see my full screen.
Perfect.
Okay. So the title of my talk is The Congo Basin and Literary Arts. And here you can see this is the Congo Basin, just an area view of part of the Congo Basin rainforest. And what exactly or where exactly is the Congo Basin, and what is it? The Congo Basin is the second largest tropical rainforest in the world after the Amazon Basin in Latin America. And the reason why I want to talk about it today is because from my research, my PhD dissertation is on the Congo Basin and environmental literature therein. It's obvious that the Congo Basin is not so much talked about internationally, that many people are not aware that a place exists on Earth known as the Congo Basin, and even people who are sometimes quite knowledgeable on environmental and climate issues. And so it is mostly and mainly because of this awareness, of this either lack of interest or invisibility about the Congo Basin that I want to make this presentation today. So I might not be digging deep into literary analysis, but I will be doing a kind of more general presentation in the hope of bringing this relatively, ignored or overlooked strategically important biodiversity hotspot to the attention of the people that are part of this network and well beyond it. So that being said, I will now continue with some facts about the Congo Basin so that we know exactly where it is and what it is and why it is important, and that we are talking about it here. I've talked about it in my PhD, and that we need to talk more about it as the crisis unfolds and as we hope to be able to curb the crisis. So the Congo Basin, once more, the second largest tropical rainforest in the world, and it is found in Central Africa. And it cuts across 6 countries. Although, yeah, of course, there are other definitions of the basin that go wider than this, that go beyond 6 countries. But the most basic is 6 countries. And these 6 countries are Cameroon, where I come from, which speaks English and French. So I come from the English-speaking part, which is a minority. Cameroon is like the reverse of Canada, where Canada has a minority Francophone population. Cameroon has a minority Anglophone population. And then it also cuts across the Central African Republic, the Republic of Congo, known sometimes just as the Congo Brazzaville, Brazzaville being its capital, and is a former French Congo. And then Congo Kinshasa, which is officially the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and is the former Belgian colony. And then Gabon and Equatorial Guinea. The Congo Basin is actually estimated at about 1.7 billion square meters. That's roughly 400 million hectares. And it drains an area approximately the size of Western Europe. And it is home to thousands of bird species, about 700 of which among these species, about 700 species of fish, 400 species of mammals, about 1,000 species of tropical plants, 80% of which are actually endemic or native to the area. And of course, they are still undiscovered or yet to be discovered species, both of flora and of fauna in the Congo Basin. There is no doubt about it. And it is actually home to about 75 million or more people from almost 150 ethnic groups or ethnic nations, or whatever you want to call it, including indigenous peoples who depend on the rainforest, the tropical rainforest of the basin for food, for fresh water, for shelter, for medicine, and many other forms of livelihood. And of course, it derives its name from the River Congo, but also the former Congo Empire that existed prior to the dissemination of that area by colonialists. And so amongst all the many species of wild animals that it has, they are different. Like, for example, we have both the mountain and the forest elephants. We have the mountain and the forest gorillas. We have bonobos, other species of monkeys, and so on and so forth, like this one here that is looking at us right here. And the Congo Basin is a popular place for mineral resources, such as crude oil, diamond, cobalt, coltan, copper, timber, uranium, etc., etc. And it is crucial, it is very crucial for carbon sequestration. And we know that the current amounts of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere today have already gone beyond control and are continuing to increase. And the Congo Basin, like the Amazon Basin or Southeastern Asian basins, are important reservoirs which help us to keep and to catch and keep this carbon through photosynthesis and other mechanisms. And so, for example, when I say other mechanisms, I'm particularly referring to the fact that they are peatlands. And just about 2 years ago, the largest peatland on Earth was discovered in the Congo Basin rainforest. And it has the capacity to store about 30 billion tons of CO2, of carbon dioxide, and that's about 3 years of global CO2 emissions. And it's important to be aware that annual carbon emissions absorbed by African tropical rainforest in general, and here I'm talking about the continental scale, are about thrice more than the United Kingdom's annual emissions. And that within that figure for Africa, about 3/4 of those emissions absorbed are actually absorbed in the Congo Basin rainforest. And the Congo Basin rainforest is fondly called the second lung or lungs of the earth. And this metaphor is because of this capacity to help us to breathe well, to sequestrate this carbon. And why the second? Because up till now, up till recently, the Amazon Basin had been considered as the first lungs of the earth. But it is important to note that that situation is beginning to change because, of course, both basins are being degraded, are being deforested, are being destroyed for various reasons, but the rates of destruction and degradation are higher in the Amazon than they are in the Congo Basin. And then again, with the recent discovery of the peatland in the Congo Basin, some scientists are already arguing that the Congo Basin is actually now the first lungs of the earth, or about to become that, if nothing is done to stop the higher rates of deforestation in the Amazon. And of course, like I said, that there are so many factors, that different activities that are destructive to these important biodiversity hotspot. They are mostly anthropogenic, human-caused factors, and they include industrialization for the most part up in the global north. Because in up north here, the industrialization that we enjoy for the most part is dependent on extractivism that goes on in these parts of the world, like the Congo Basin or the Amazon or Southeast Asia and elsewhere in the global south. Like, for example, even the ecological transition that we are all clamoring for, which is important, but at the same time is a risky thing, is a complicated thing, not risky anyway, it's a complicated thing and very complex, because who is paying the price for transition? As we are transitioning into electric cars and we are happy and celebrating them up north, there is a lot of destruction that is going on down south and accounting for that, and without which this transition is not going to be possible. Other factors include mining, and again, mining is linked to industrialization, or drilling, the same logging. Although, yeah, with activities such as logging, we might also say there are some forms of local artisanal logging or logging for domestic purposes, but a lot of the timber exploited actually lives. Then, of course, agriculture, wildlife trafficking, demographic expansion, urbanization, etc., etc. All of these factors are actually a huge threat in different varieties, in different degrees, I should say, to the continuous existence of the Congo Basin rainforest. And so, of course, like I've already said, but it's worth repeating, the Congo Basin is therefore a very strategic geopolitical hotspot for political, economic, ecological, climate, neo-colonial, and other forms of interest. So there are a lot of interests that are being played out with regard to the Congo Basin. And so gradually, but also I think increasingly, it is becoming one of the places that people have to talk about when they gather in the COP discussions, of course. But then, like I said at the beginning here, it seems that many people who are not so close to the COP circles or who are not fundamentally well informed about climate issues seem not to know that there is this Congo Basin that also needs to be preserved in one way or the other, and not just the forests and the animals, but also the people who are there. And so, of course, the Congo Basin came up quite powerfully last time in the COP26 in Glasgow, and it is, of course, included in the forest deal that was arrived there, but this is just a deal, and we are looking forward to seeing if the deal, if the promises, the pledges made towards deploying money for the protection of such tropical rainforests will be done, because of course it has already been noted by researchers and politicians and other stakeholders, and so it is indisputable that climate financing is very insignificant in the direction of the Congo Basin and Africa. Very, very insignificant as compared to the share of climate financing received by other parts of the world, like maybe the Amazon or Southeast Asia and elsewhere. And then, of course, that is part of what I'm already saying, that industrialized nations they actually owe an ecological debt to pay to the countries that are not only helping absorb, especially countries around the Congo Basin, countries around these different, metaphorically, so to say, lungs of the earth, which are helping to sequestrate the carbon that is continuously emitted in the industrialized nations, whether it's Western Europe, whether it is North America, whether it is China or Japan, as part of rendering justice, because there is injustice, different forms of climate injustice, that people who are contributing very little to the global carbon footprint are the ones suffering the most from the factors or from the consequences, like what David mentioned at the beginning, the floods in South Sudan. And there is no shortage of floods even within the Congo Basin, of course, and other harmful activities that are provoked by climate change. But the good news, at least, is that in Scandinavia, Norway is one of the leading countries when it comes to climate action. And this year, Norway actually started paying out some money to the Republic of Gabon as part of a deal reached through what is called the Congo Basin, the CAFI, the Central African Forest Initiative, which helps to negotiate and also helps as a platform through which climate finance for the Congo Basin forest passes through. So because of its exemplary management of its forest resources, Gabon has happened to be the first country to receive this financing, and it is hoped that other countries, if they meet other requirements, they will receive the money. But of course, there are always doubts or questions as to whether when the money is actually received, does it trickle down to those who are most in need of it? And so, just 1 second. Yeah, of course. I will now be talking about some literature that is on or about the Congo Basin. And it is clear that while I'm talking about those literary texts, I will be doing some kind of back and forth, sometimes coming back to issues that I've already mentioned now, but so just bear with me. And because in the last part of my presentation, I will be reading some poems by myself, because I also write poetry, and some of my poems, but not all of them, also touch on ecological issues. So that being said, I just thought it's important that I begin this part of the presentation of my talk by letting you know that there is literature, an abundance of literature about the Congo Basin, and it depends on the perspective from which one looks at. So before I delve into environmental literature, it's important to note that the different countries of the Congo Basin have their national literatures, and those even literatures are not just homogeneous. Because even within Cameroon, for example, we have Anglophone literature, we have Francophone literature, that is literature first in colonial languages, but of course, and then literature in indigenous national languages. And so when you take the case of Cameroon, for example, we have about 300 ethnic communities with languages in Cameroon. And each of those languages is a vehicle for artistic expressions that do not exclude literature. And so there are, of course, so many popular writers who come from different countries of the Congo Basin who are not necessarily writing about environmental concerns, although, of course, each literary text is capable or can be analyzed from an ecological perspective. But I just thought I could mention in passing some names, because Cameroon and Congo Brazzaville seem to be the countries that are most productive in terms of literature in the basin, because you have some of the most popular writers who are not only of today, but since even the times of independence, shortly before independence and up to now. And so in Cameroon, for instance, you will hear about writers like Mongo Betty, Ferdinand Oyono. Today, we know of Mbolo Mbuwe in the US, other writers like from Gabon, Bessora, or Nadia Origo, then in Cameroon again, Calix Beyala, and then in Congo, writers like Sonny Labov Tansi, writers like Chigaya Utamsi, Alain Mabanku, who is contemporary and based in the US too, and then writers like Blaise Ndala, who is in Canada. But also, the Congo Basin is also very interesting, an interesting place, because people who are not from there have written about it, of course, as people have always written about other parts of the world. And so two notable texts I thought I should share with you are the very controversial novel by a British writer, Joseph Conrad, known as The Heart of Darkness, which has been criticized, rightly so, for its stereotypical representation of Africans in the Congo Basin, with a lot of very unacceptable racial slurs or things that, in that direction. And one of the persons who took at him so fiercely was African popular novelist, Nigerian popular novelist, Chinua Achebe. He was one of the first persons to have critiqued that novel, and also to have even written a novel, his popular novel, Things Fall Apart, which is in a sense a kind of writing back, not only to Conrad, but to other imperial views and opinions of the African people or African peoples. And then, of course, there is also Une Saison au Congo by a popular political play by Aimé Césaire. Aimé Césaire was a French writer from Martinique, and he wrote this tragedy about chronicling the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, who was the first leader of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And because he wanted real independence for his country, the real prosperity of his country, because he had a good vision for his country, he was assassinated. With the complicity of Western powers, of course. In fact, Western powers ordered for his assassination. And so this play talks about that. But that said, now I want to talk about texts that are more explicitly environmental from the Congo Basin. Although one or two of them might not be quite explicitly environmental, but these are some of the texts that are more environmentally inclined and talking about or are discussing and representing ecological and climate issues in the Congo Basin. Some of these texts have actually been used as the main key text for analysis in my dissertation, but some have not. Some have already been mentioned in passing, but still important that we know at least some of them. And of course, some of these texts are used as a form of raising awareness or raising ecological awareness, as a form of sensitization, a way of disseminating climate knowledge about issues like deforestation, species extinction, but also the management of resources, whether it is good governance or bad governance, good management or bad management of those resources. So some of the texts are some of the texts that could fit this category, but of course, and also fit other categories and other thematic angles of analysis would be Le Cri de la Forêt, co-written by Henri Njombo from Congo Brazzaville and Jose Collins Kwanyi from Cameroon. This is a play that was written in 2012 and republished in 2015. Then we have Njogobi Festival by Cameroonian poet, writer, novelist, and academic John Kemgong Kengasong. And it should be noted that Henri Njombo is a politician. He was just dropped from government this year, but he has been for a very long time a member of government in Congo, but also writes a lot of novels and then also plays, and most of his plays are on environmental concerns. And then this novel by Nadia Origo. Nadia Origo comes from Gabon, and she's now based in France, and she has a publishing house known as Edition La Doxa. And so this was her first novel, and it also deals with environmental concerns. It's the story of a young girl who is a climate activist, not in the sense of maybe marching on the streets, but one who volunteers her time at the service of environmental NGOs to go on a mission whose aim is to sensitize local populations as to how best to manage their resources. And then, of course, some texts could either be in support of a model of conservation, like what we call fortress conservation, which is basically sending out people who have lived in areas like the forest for thousands of years, who are actually part of the forest, and then suddenly expelling them with force in the name of conservation. And then also some are actually questioning that kind of model of conservation. And then we have poetry dealing with different forms of forest metaphors or a play. And so that's the case with all of these texts here would fit in this kind of topics that I'm raising here, including governance and politics, how bad governance leads to or contributes to or exacerbates the climate crisis. And that would be the case of, for example, Le Mal de Terre, which at the same time is discussing urbanization and deforestation. And then Forest Echoes is a collection of poetry by Cameroonian poet and professor Nola Lembong. Le Mal de Terre is by Henri Njombo, and The Last Hope is by Ekpe Inyang, Cameroonian poet, playwright, and environmentalist who works with WWF. And then some of these texts, for instance, help us to critique sustainable development as imposed on the Congo Basin, or as wrongly imposed, because sustainable development, of course, it has its weaknesses, but when well implemented, it can make some impact. But then what happens when it is suddenly imposed on a group of people by people who have come from the West and who have a lot of disregard for pre-existing or for other forms of knowledge that pre-exist before their arrival? And that would be the case, for example, in a novel like Les Marchands du Développement Durable by Asitu Ndinga from Congo Brazzaville. He is a conservationist himself. He's worked in the sector for several years, for many, many years, I should say. And then when he writes this kind of text, it is also a kind of an insider perspective to how conservation can go wrong, or to the things that might make environmental conservation not work. And then, of course, a novel like Congo Inc., Le Testament de Bismarck by Nkole Jean Bofani, who comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and he's currently living in Belgium. This is a text about the clash of capitalism and other forms of isms that are coming for African resources. And then if you really need to understand how war, green imperialism, how green colonialism is operating in Africa, and also to understand why, for instance, there is a perpetual war going on in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is the area with the richest kinds of minerals on earth, including the coltan and the cobalt and uranium, the uranium that is used in industrialized nations to make the atomic bombs, or the coltan that is used in making batteries, the batteries of our green transition. So if you read a text like this one, and the good news for you, for everyone at least, is that Congo Inc. is not only in French, it was written originally in French, but it has already been translated into English and other languages. So people who read English can be able to get the English version of this novel, and I highly recommend it. And then a novel like Le Silence de la Forêt, this novel is the lone novel I would say is not very much explicitly environmental, especially in the sense that first it was published in 1984 by a Central African Republican citizen and writer, Etienne Goyemide. But the rest of the text I've shown you so far that are dealing with environmental problems in the Congo Basin have all been written in the 21st century. So this is the only one that was written in the 20th century. And so the people writing in the 21st century are more aware of the devastating consequences of the climate and ecological crisis. But for him, at his time, the ecological crisis was less visible as it is today. But again, he provides a very fascinating story about indigenous people. And this is just the Central African, one of the indigenous people in the Central African Republic that make up the Congo Basin. Cameroon has indigenous people, Congo has, Gabon has, and these people have for a long time just been called pygmies because colonialists came and called them pygmies, and they were just referring to, because for the most part they are short, but they're not always short. So this is a highly contested term. It's considered by some people to be pejorative, but generally what is done now is that researchers and any other person talking about them, for the most part, it's recommended that you look for their native name for themselves and you use it maybe in attachment with this, if it is very necessary to distinguish them from other people in that country. And so, for example, in Cameroon, we will talk about the Baka pygmies. If you go to like the eastern region of Cameroon, you'll find maybe the Baka pygmies. And then in this novel, it is talking about the Babinga pygmies in the Central African Republic. And I guess this novel might have been translated because it was so popular that it was eventually turned into a film. My guess is that it might have been translated. Well, that was that for, for other people. So I want to talk a little bit about me. Nsah as a poet and as a writer. So these are some of my own publications, mostly poetry, but I could not bring all of the images here. So this is Bites of Insanity, a collection of poems published in 2015. If You Must Fall Bush, another collection of poems published in 2016. Then Constimocracy, Mal-Africanizing Democracy, another collection of poems published in 2017. And in all of these collections, you can always find one or two or three or more poems that are explicitly environmental or ecological, but of course, amongst many other issues that my poems deal with. And then, of course, I also write in French. And so, something just went wrong. Yeah. So, this one, I published it in 2019 and it's in French. It's known as Les Pleurs du Mal. And of course, also in this one, you will find some poems that are environmental or ecological in their inclinations. So at this juncture, I would like to read some poems. The first poem I will be reading is entitled Gross Destructive Progress. So gross destructive progress is Actually, I've not written the full title here, but the full title includes a bracket, and in that bracket we have GDP. So it's a take on GDP as we know it in economic terms. And so this graph is part of that poem. So that's why I put the graph here, but you will hear the rest of the poem, but keep in mind this graph. And remember that this graph is actually moving from the resources x-axis to the growth infinitum axis. So you see, you understand that the movement is from here, from the right to the left. So gross destructive progress, GDP. We are woodpeckers in the Amazon basin, swimming in smoky oceans up in the sky as our pecked homes collapse into ashes along with friendly tortured trees below. Furious flames flash all over the forest, but human eyes are turned away, neither watching nor wrestling to block bloodbaths in Bolivia. They are counting cash in California. They are glued to GDP scales on screens. Here in Australia's Great Artesian Basin, we are refugee Atechinos exiled by fires and human hunger into imagistic memories as our homes disappear into smoke and rubble. Smoldering logs vanish with unknown species, but human eyes are turned away, neither watching nor calming flaring tempers and flying rockets in Iraq. They are surveying new Arabian oil fields. They are glued to GDP scales on screens. We are homeless gorillas from the Congo Basin, running into bullets in endless palm oil fields as our homes descend in flames of development, while floral and faunal screams fade into chaos. Aquatic communities choke into plastic echoes, but human eyes are turned away, neither watching nor ending killing sprees in the southern Cameroons. They are speculating new prices for Angoloi. They are glued to GDP scales on screens. While our world wins out in flames, billionaires with white wines and whiskeys on golden couches smile before screens, displaying World Bank GDP charts and graphs, non-attentive to new ecological GDP graphs cast by ozone on the skins of giant pandas, carved on melting ice and sprawling deserts, where red lines originating from finite X termina slope upwards and backwards to infinite Y infinitum. This poem was written on the 8th of January 2020. I don't know how we are doing with time. I'm not able to see time. Do we still have time?
You know what? I don't have a clock in front of me. Hold on a second, which is a nice thing.
Yeah.
We have another 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
As you wish.
So if you want another one, then I can read one more, because I actually prepared 3.
Please. Yes.
So the next poem I will read is entitled The Prize of Modernity. You can see the title on the screen, and then you will hear the poem. The Prize of Modernity. Chew a stick to clean your teeth with, and you are labeled as poor and primitive. So you embrace imported toothbrushes and impregnate foreign coffers, while seas and rivers pay polluting prices. Trim avian feathers to clean your ears with, and you are labeled as poor and primitive. So you purchase imported cotton swabs and increase foreign jobs, while land and water prosper in plastics. Drink palm wine in horns or calabashes, and you are nicknamed poor and backward. So you settle for their plastic and glass bottles and increase foreign GDPs, while plastics flood your lands and waters. Soak your tapioca without sugar, and you are nicknamed poor and backward. So you buy imported sugars and fuel foreign economies while your body pays diabetic prices. My friend, savour your nkang in local cups, cook sha or tap palmy instead of coke and beer. Soak your gari in fresh morning wine. Use feathers and sticks if you like this earth, and thank your ancestors after a ripe old age. Then the last one. I am an aquatic emissary. I am an aquatic emissary dispatched by water creatures in Yaoundé, Douala, Limbe, Bamenda, and Betwa. Our aquatic vision is ecological consternation and chaos. I am out to preach the good news of prudence like Pentecostals preaching the good news of science. I must warn city dwellers to repent and refrain from dumping refuse and toxic waste into water bodies. I must notify councils that most city toilets end in waters. I must inform dozy Yaoundé fellows of broken bottles in streams. We are sick and tired of dumped human corpses and fetuses. When our aquatic medics visit upland forests for medicines to cure our intoxicated young ones, they meet artificial deserts created by the same humans who send toxic invaders to our seas. Enough of this ecological xenophobia against fish, frogs, and crabs. I urgently summon all humans to tables of ecological diplomacy. And this one is published in If You Must Fall Bush, 2016. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. I'm going to switch my screen. Yep. Very powerful. The images and the almost physicality of feeling the sensibility of what you write about leaves me really impacted. We have some time now, of course, for Q&A. Normally what happens is I've been taking notes and I have so many questions, but I want to deeply thank you. I think this is such an important way for us to end this year of online exchange. And I guess the thing that really a big takeaway I have is that why is the conditions in the global south, in the Congo Basin, in the areas, why are these not on the front line of the discussions in COP26, in the everyday discussion of the global climate crisis? This is what's shocking to me. And having you in our network has been incredibly important because we didn't discuss this. But it seems that how can one have a discussion about this without this, at least this awareness? If I may, and I was thinking, for example, there's this Congo Inc. That's a book that I would really like to find. And you said that there might be an English translation.
Yeah, I said it's translated into English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you follow Naomi Klein in her writings. She's the Canadian writer, and her book, This Changes Everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's much, if any, mention about this African or the rainforest of the Congo or anything in her book.
Okay.
And there are a lot of the issues of the climate Inc., the industrialization and the commercialization, capitalization, which I'm thinking is part of what Congo Inc. is. Is that correct?
Yeah. Because it's about different things, but the good thing is that it's a well-delivered novel. It's a very complex novel, the setting ranging from the Congo to North America and the US, right over to China and back, but delivered with superb expertise, so that you are reading about civil war, you're reading about warlords, but you're also reading about the implications of United Nations forces and how some of them sometimes actually connive with warlords or traffic weapons meant for some different business for a different business. And then at the same time, you're reading about the climate crisis and how disruptive what we call modernity or symbols thereof, like telecommunication pylons and so on and so forth, what they can do if they are implanted into the forest of, for example, the Salonga National Park, which is actually the largest national park in Africa.
I want to make a statement, and I don't mean this in any patronizing manner. I'm very sincere. You are such an asset and a gift for our host university. I mean, your voice and this information is, especially here in the Nordic area,
Mhm.
because again, we are so far removed from that. And I will make just a personal statement. We have a very comfortable opportunity here to approach the climate crisis, which we are, I mean, we are living it. But I was reading through the immediate sense when you started to talk about the raw minerals, the whether it's the uranium or the copper, my immediate thought went, how will these countries protect these raw materials from, I would almost say, industrialization,
Mhm.
colonization, industrialization?
Mhm.
Because as you say, every single time we go out and buy a new mobile telephone or attempt to buy a new EV, electric vehicle,
Or
there
laptop.
could be an absolute direct impact upon your environment
Yeah,
where you
it's
about
not
where
even
you
like that.
spoke.
There could be, there is
It
obviously,
is.
yeah, from the children who are sometimes exploited and forced to work in the mines, and to the raging wars between different warlords who are trying to control the places where the resources are found, to the cutting down of parts of the forest to harvest those resources. There is just no way that, in fact, for any iPhone or for any Android phone, for any laptop we are manipulating up here, there is some price being paid down there.
I call it economic colonization.
Yeah,
Um,
or
and,
green, and also
right.
which also factors into green colonialism in a sense. Yeah.
That's interesting about Norway's kind of overt support, but we also have to look that they have that national fund, which is supported by their oil industry,
Yeah.
although they're slowly trying to pivot towards the green economy. It is
Mhm.
so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Um, other things. One thing, um, boy, there was this one image that really hit me in between the eyes. You talked about the palm oil fields in one of your poems, and you know, we consume a lot of palm oil up
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, in different forms, because like even we also consume it, but i can I can say that for the most part we consume like kind of raw palm oil, so to say, or so to speak, in the sense that the palm oil we consume is actually palm oil. You see it reddish in color and we use it for cooking food, but generally this comes from like local farmers who have small farms. But the companies, the multinationals that come and buy like thousands of hectares of land and cultivate palm oil, nearly all of that palm oil is exported. And then it is consumed here in transformed products. It's transformed into many other kinds of things. And we know how environmentally damaging that is.
well, it's one of the very small gestures is look at the food labels when you're buying your cookies
Mm-hmm.
or practically everything, because there
Yeah.
is a way to kind of quote boycott that uh, in, in some small gesture. Um, uh, a couple of things. Would it be possible? I know we have to understand Kenneth is literally, and I don't mean to speak on your behalf, but I know you're about to submit your doctoral research, correct?
Yeah.
And
in less than 2 weeks.
yeah, so we're not going to give tremendous amounts of responsibility. It would be so great to get a bibliography that we can include on the website when we post the YouTube recording. And if you happen to have a moment to send that, that would be really important. And
I think I prepared something like that for my talk. Although I'm not very sure if it is for all the text there, but it doesn't include my own text, but it includes the other text that I mentioned. I think for all the other texts that I mentioned, I have them here. So
maybe I can do a search for your text and just add those to the list. So
yeah, for all of my texts that I mentioned, you can find them on Amazon.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Does anybody else have
But
any?
remember, when you are searching, make sure to search with Nsah Mala and not
Yes.
Kenneth. So, yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody? I've kind of once again had my own monologue commandeering the Q&A, but I leave this open to others. Any comments or Sebastian?
Yes. Judy, do you have?
We can't quite hear you. If you could speak louder, please.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to unplug my earphones. Hi, Nasamala. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I will say very deeply say thank you. This impacts so much either to me that your conference or your talk has been really hard to able to listen all your discussion or this situation. How do you reflect the situation? And also, I would like to say that your mission really transcend and touch. I think my conscience. I think that the rest of the conscience of the world. I hope that really more people in the world can follow the same mission, that the change to preserve the heritage of our nature. It's also quite tragic, dramatic, and to address this problem, literature is necessary as you do in your poems, and really this kind of genre. The poetry is one of the most difficult genre, and you are very courage. It's also part of your personality or your character. And say thank you, really, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you embody. Oh, I'm hearing myself. You embody exactly, I think, what we strive for in the Cape Network is that your informed, deeply informed background about the issues. Oh, our friend from Greenland just joined us.
Okay.
Deeply informed background with, we've now heard your poetical, creative perspective that also carries forth a message that through that medium is even more powerful than just a newspaper headline.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Valo. We've been on for an hour, maybe the time zone difference, but anyway, it's been recorded. And we love that you're here from Greenland. We have a nice global small cohort again from Spain, from Lithuania, from Aarhus, and Greenland and Finland. As we come to an end, I want to thank our guest, Kenneth, deeply from our network. I think, again, I'm reiterating myself, but a really important way to end this year-long series of seminars, webinars, and most importantly, would you please inform me, and I can share this with the network, because if I'm not mistaken, your doctoral defense is public and it will be streaming.
Yes, it might be streamed. For now, it's not yet decided, but it's very likely going to be streamed because I think with the corona situation becoming again worse, it's very likely going to be screened.
Right. And I also would like to say,
and I could also try to plead with the administration, even in the event that circumstances permit for a physical meeting. I could still plead with the administration to see if they can do a hybrid form, because I've seen the hybrid in the past.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We would very much like to keep in touch with you, and in future engagements to certainly inform you of what we're doing, and vice versa. We would very much like to know about you. And also, this is a forum for potential networking for other projects. Sebastian in Spain has listed his credentials. I will send along everybody's contact information, because I think that the fact is that the Cape Network is probably coming to an end this spring, which is fine. We've been active now, but there could be opportunities for other funded projects that come out of our network. And Kenneth, we would very much like to be in touch with you about that possibility. So if nobody has other comments, we will end here and just say in Finnish, we could say huvasti, which is farewell, but then we're going to actually say näkemiin, which means we will see you later. We don't say goodbye.
Thank you. And actually in Cameroon, we say in French, on est ensemble, and which will mean something like we are together, even when we are separating. Or we would say in my own language, Basa, we would say, and a is like, let's keep it for now to resume later. So it's like, keep it, let's keep it and resume later. Thank you.
That is what we will do, for sure. Thank you, everybody, and a special thanks to Kenneth, and wishing him all the best. I'm sure he will fly through his doctoral defense, and a very moving afternoon. Wishing everybody a great afternoon, and we'll be in touch. This will be posted on the Cape Network within the next 48 to 72 hours. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.